Imagine waking up, stumbling into the bathroom, and seeing an absolute disaster in the mirror. Your hair is sticking straight up, and there's a giant streak of bright blue toothpaste right across your cheek. But instead of grabbing a towel or a comb to fix it, you simply shrug it off. You turn your back on the mirror, grab your backpack, and walk out the door. You go about your entire day acting like everything is perfectly fine, completely ignoring the glowing blue mess on your face. That sounds ridiculous, right? If you see a glaring problem staring back at you, the natural response is to wash your face and fix it. You don't just walk away and forget what you look like. That exact scenario is actually an ancient illustration from the Bible. You can find it in the New Testament, right in the first chapter of the book of James. James writes that anyone who listens to God's word but doesn't actually do what it says is exactly like that forgetful kid. They look at themselves, walk away, and immediately forget what they saw. James teaches that the Bible serves as a mirror. It shows us our flaws so we can take action, clean up the mess, and change how we live. To understand how to make those changes, James points us straight to God. He calls him the Father of the heavenly lights, and describes him as the source of every good and perfect gift in our lives. Think about how shadows on the ground stretch and shrink as the sun moves across the sky. James explains that God behaves completely differently. His goodness and his character never shift, and they never change. Because we can rely on that perfect goodness, James tells us exactly what to do when we face difficult trials or confusing times. We need to ask God for wisdom. When we ask, God gives that wisdom generously to absolutely anyone. He doesn't get angry that you need help, and he doesn't look for your faults before answering. But there is one rule. When you ask God for this wisdom, you have to truly believe he will give it. You absolutely must ask without doubting him. James compares a double-minded person to an ocean wave, constantly being blown and tossed back and forth by the wind. If your trust is that scattered and unstable, you shouldn't expect to receive anything, because you are unsteady in everything. True faith means putting your anchor down in God's solid, unchanging nature, rather than letting temporary fears and doubts toss you around in the storm. Once you trust God and ask for his wisdom, you have to actually put that wisdom to work. If you listen to the word but never take action, you deceive yourself. James gives us very specific instructions for how a doer of the word acts every day. First, he tells us to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Next, he tackles how we handle temptation. When you feel the pull to do something you know is wrong, you cannot blame God. God does not tempt anyone with evil. Temptation actually happens when our own bad internal desires drag us away and try to trick us into making poor choices. The ultimate test of living out God's word comes down to how we treat others. James writes that pure, faultless religion means looking after the most vulnerable people, specifically orphans and widows in distress. For us today, that means actively paying attention to the people around us. It means sitting with the lonely kid at school or offering to help a neighbor who is having a hard time. Following God is proven by how you control your temper, fight back against bad choices, and practically care for all the people in your community, rather than how many Bible verses you can recite from memory. This brings us right back to the mirror. James calls God's word the perfect law that gives freedom. When you look intently into this perfect mirror, you don't act like the kid who walks away covered in toothpaste. You remember what you see, you wash your face, and you fix the mess. James promises that the person who remembers the word and actively does the work will be highly blessed in whatever they do. Doing the right thing isn't always easy. Living this out will sometimes put you in difficult trials that test your patience and push you to your limits. There is a massive reward for pushing through those tough times. James says that anyone who perseveres under trial will receive the crown of life promised by the Lord. This crown represents the eternal reward and the complete, grounded maturity we gain when we show our love for God through our everyday actions. So don't be a listener who hears a nice message and walks away unchanged. Look closely in the mirror of God's word. Ask him for the wisdom you need and actively live out what it says.